What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Ribardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson. And the New York Rangers have parted ways with Gerard Gallant officially over this past weekend. And we want to go ahead and dive into three head coaching options that could potentially replace Gerard Gallant. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what Chris Drury lands on here, who he lands on here, because he was very vague in his season closing press conference about what the Rangers are looking for. He basically said that they're hoping to compile a good, long, robust list of candidates. But he said that he wants to have a very thorough process. So I don't expect the Rangers to make a hiring anytime soon. And I think that there's plenty of candidates to dive into and really discuss here as we preview who maybe could be the next head coach of the Rangers. And he also said that he's not looking for any specific style of head coach in mind for Gerard Gallant's replacement, but rather, quote, I'm just looking for the right fit, end quote. That's what Chris Drury had to say. So we pulled three names out of a hat here that kind of have very different styles from one another, who have their pros, definitely have their cons. We want to go ahead and discuss these guys and kind of touch on who we think could be a realistic choice for the Rangers as they make this decision, very crucial decision this offseason. And of course, give you our takes and opinions on all of these candidates as well, and hopefully continue to dive into more candidates in future episodes. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a like. If you do enjoy, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And of course, leave your comments down below so we can engage with you and discuss these choices. But without further ado, Eric, how are you doing today, my friend? And who is the first candidate that you want to discuss to potentially replace Gerard Gallant?
I'm doing good, and I'm still a little 50-50 on how I feel about the Gallant firing. We've been over it before. He had his pros, he also had his cons, and it's a very bold, risky decision to part ways with your head coach in the middle of a cup window. And depending on whoever we hire, and within the coming weeks throughout this offseason, that cup window could either extend or be closed off immediately, depending on how they fit in with the team. But we got a couple of good options here. And the first one that I really like that I've been looking at is Peter Laviolette. He's 58 years old, so he's a veteran coach. He's been around for a very long time in the coaching world of the NHL. He's eighth on the all-time list of wins with 752 wins. He's had playoff success in the past. He brought Carolina to a Stanley Cup victory all the way back in 2006. And the biggest thing that I like a lot with him is that he's familiar with the Metropolitan Division. If the Rangers were to hire him, we would be the fifth team that he's coached in our division, behind the Hurricanes, Islanders, Flyers, and Capitals. Capitals most recently, where he had a 3-year stint with them until just recently, like last month, they decided to part ways as well. So I don't know. He's a good coach. He has a lot of great playoff success in the past. He's taken 3 different teams to the Stanley Cup Finals, only won one of them, but he's come close, which is more than Gallant ever did for us. So I like Laviolette.
Yeah, and I think that Laviolette is a very interesting choice. It's kind of a nice change of pace from Gerard Gallant in the sense that, Gallant was very defensive minded. He really wanted to be kind of one of those heavy hitter, aggressive teams, but the Rangers personnel doesn't really match up with that, right? We have so much offensive firepower with guys like Artemi Panarin. Of course, we added Patrick Kane. We'll see if he remains. We'll see if Tarasenko remains. We're going to, of course, record episodes on those guys soon, kind of preview what the future might look like for this Rangers offense. But so much offensive firepower, the defense, not exactly the strength of this team. So I don't really know if the personnel that the Rangers had during this playoff run, this short playoff run that they just had, really matched up with the style that Gerard Gallant wants to play with. So, of course, they're parting ways. But Peter Laviolette, known for a fast-paced, aggressive, offensive approach, maybe that could be a welcome change for the Rangers forwards. Of course, with Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin still under contract for several more seasons, Vincent Trocheck as well. Having that fast-paced offensive mindset might be a welcome change and might be what the Rangers need to hopefully unlock some better performances out of these guys. Maybe it could be the reason that Artemi Panarin plays well in the postseason. I think that the Rangers, kind of mindset was pulling them out of what Gallant wanted them to do, having such offensive-minded players. So maybe a really offensive-minded head coach who really prioritizes having that fast-paced, speedy approach might really be what Artemi Panarin and some of these other guys need. However, he also does have that no-nonsense style in the locker room. How would that translate to the Rangers? Because we know that Gallant, pretty no-nonsense, a real tough guy. So maybe the Rangers, while you would be getting X's and O's change here with Laviolette, right? X's and O's meaning, you're getting the more offensive mind. maybe they're looking for more of a locker room change, not someone who's no nonsense, but someone who's kind of, more of a player's coach. What are your thoughts on that, Eric, in terms of having those two different mindsets there? Do you think that, the Rangers should be looking for a guy who's very offensive minded, considering the personnel that they have? And also, what are your thoughts on going back into the well and getting another no nonsense head coach? Do you think that's even a smart idea for the Rangers right now?
Yeah, I mean, I like the offensive minded part of it. And, as the days have gone by since Gallant's firing, we've been reading reports and like quotes from different players. Like it's come out that throughout the playoffs, Gallant and Drury kept arguing back and forth. Apparently, a lot of the players in the Rangers locker room just really disliked Gallant. I know Artemi Panarin is one of those names right there where he just like openly was against everything that Gallant was doing. And I think the biggest problem with him was that he kind of just relied too much on just letting the players do whatever they wanted. We leaned, especially this postseason, we leaned very hard into like the individual talent where we're just like, send Patrick Kane out there, let him do his thing. There was no set structure to it. We had a very star-studded offense, and it was kind of just like Gallant was like, go out there, score some goals. There was no plan, no game plan or anything. So to have a guy like Peter Laviolette who is going to lean heavier onto that offensive power and kind of actually put together some sort of structure to take all of that talent and make it one cohesive unit that's scoring goals together, I think is definitely something that the Rangers need. And the locker room thing is going to be a huge thing too, where having players that completely just like disrespected and didn't care for Gallant, they're not going to listen to him, even if he did have a plan. So I don't know, having a guy who's going to go into the locker room, kind of make things, again, no nonsense, but actually have some sort of plan that might gain the players' attention a little bit more. We said throughout the playoffs, it looked like players didn't even really want to be there. They didn't really want to make that playoff push. And, now we know why. It was a whole locker room thing where just no one cared for Gallant. So I think it would be a benefit to bring in a guy like Laviolette.
I think I could agree with you, but I think I'd also make the counterpoint, or at least play a little bit of devil's advocate and say, since the Rangers locker room had such a tough time getting behind Gallant, wanting to play for him, maybe finding a head coach who they would want to play for would be more beneficial and unlock that next level for them. And so that's why I'm a little 50-50 on getting another no-nonsense guy. Will the team want to play for him? Of course, it's always about how the culture is set, how the tone is set, whether or not they're going to buy into the culture. And that remains to be seen. Of course, we've seen players buy into the culture for Laviolette, and he's one of the winningest coaches in history. So, but maybe it's dated tradition at this point. Who knows? But I do think that he would be an interesting hire and one to get excited about if you really like to watch the Rangers score some goals. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But let's move on to our second candidate here. Now, this is an assistant coach who actually did have a little bit of head coaching experience as an interim. I'll read to you snippets from a Bleacher Report article about Mike Sullivan of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So he's still got a job over in Pittsburgh. It's not a head coaching job, but it is an assistant coaching job. And if you don't know, the Penguins recently just revamped their entire front office, dismissed both Ron Hextall and Brian Burke. So there is a rumor out there, suggested rumor and report that Chris Drury does have Mike Sullivan on his short list of potential replacements for Gallant this offseason. So I think that this is a candidate that's very much worth noting, considering there's reported interest from Drury. And I also think that with Mike Sullivan here, if the Penguins and their new front office, here's the snippet from Bleacher Report, the Penguins and their new front office management decide to go in another direction, Drury would be interested in bringing in the former assistant head coach with the Rangers, according to The Athletic. So I think that's something to keep in mind. So Eric, what are your thoughts on Mike Sullivan? Again, still under contract with the Penguins. No guarantee that they do want to move on from him, but he's had a lot of success in recent years, and there is a chance that the Drury would be interested in going ahead and hiring him if he's available.
I mean, Mike Sullivan, he's a great coach. Obviously, he took Pittsburgh to back-to-back Stanley Cup victories, and despite not making the playoffs this year, Pittsburgh has always been one of those amazing teams. And sure, you can thank a lot of the players for that, where they had Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, all these great players throughout the years. But up until this year, Pittsburgh had the longest playoff appearance streak in the entire league. So you got to thank a coach for that. So Mike Sullivan's a great coach. He knows how to put together a team in the playoffs that can make it to the Stanley Cup and win. Like you mentioned, the only problem that would come with him is that he is still hired in Pittsburgh. So it's going to be tough to just kind of wait and see what's going to happen with his status in Pittsburgh, where they only missed the playoffs just this one year. So the team is changing now. Like you mentioned, they have dismissed a couple of other people in that front office. The status of certain players who have been a part of their veteran core kind of up in the air. So we might be seeing a very new Pittsburgh team coming in within the next couple of weeks. Who's going to be let go, who's going to get traded throughout the offseason. So once the players start to be moved, anyone in the front office is kind of there too. So is it possible to see Mike Sullivan get dropped by Pittsburgh? Potentially. I don't know how likely it is, but it's definitely a possibility. And if it were to happen, I think he would immediately move to a top candidate for the New York Rangers head coach, where right now I'm still leaning a bit more towards Laviolette overall, but that's mainly just because Sullivan is not currently available on the table. If he were to get fired by Pittsburgh, then yes, Chris Drury, go all in on that, because that is something that can take our already playoff experienced core and just elevate them to like a Stanley Cup winning team, really.
Yeah, and I did misspeak there. He is the head coach of Pittsburgh. The next guy we're going to be talking about is an assistant head coach. But with Sullivan, I do think that there's a lot to be said about his success, particularly in the postseason. We know that the Rangers are looking for playoff performers right now after a very disappointing first-round exit to the Devils. But another thing to keep in mind, I mean, we've kind of touched on this, but just to be more specific about it, Sullivan is under contract through 2026 to 27 season. So that's still several more years that he is under contract with Pittsburgh. So they might not move on from him for that reason, because he would still have to be on their payroll for several years. And of course, most teams don't like to pay two head coaches at once while also only having one head coach. But again, there's a massive shakeups going on in Pittsburgh right now. If the Penguins do decide to revamp, and they already started to, they have revamped their front office, but if they decide to go for a full blow it up, rebuild, start from level one all over again, then I think that you could see Mike Sullivan available. And if he is, I do believe Chris Drury is going to have a lot of interest, in particular, not just because of the reported interest and the rumors, but it just makes sense. All of the playoff success, not recent playoff success. We know that Sullivan just struggled with Pittsburgh most recently, but made the postseason 8 times across 10 seasons. And of course, he's got 2 cups to his name. So I do think that Sullivan would be a top candidate if he were made available. And Drury's reported interest is, of course, something worth noting. Let's talk about this next guy, a little bit out of the box hiring. This is the assistant head coach that we wanted to discuss. And this is a coach who just recently assisted in the bouncing of the Rangers from the postseason. Andrew Brunette, he's an assistant coach for the Devils, and he did help lead them into this postseason. And here's a little snippet to read about him. This came after he led the Panthers to the President's Trophy as an interim coach last year, 49 years old. Was thought to have a chance of sticking around in Florida, but when they opted to hire Paul Maurice, he came to New Jersey to work under Lindy Ruff. With 1 season of NHL head coaching experience, he wouldn't be a complete novice in the position, but he's also fresh enough to bring a different perspective from some of the old guard candidates and is considered a top-notch communicator with 16 years of playing experience at the highest level. So some believe that he could relate really well to today's players, and it should be noted that he was arrested on February 1st and charged with driving under the influence. So there is a massive red flag here with Andrew Brunette, but there are a lot of positives to discuss. I'm not sure if Chris Drury would immediately take him off the candidacy list because of his recent arrest. However, there is something to say about a guy who, has some real up and coming experience. Maybe it's a lesson he learned from in the past, and he's ready for a head coaching job. But I do think that is a massive red flag that might prevent him from being a top head coaching candidate. However, he is a real up-and-comer. He's well-regarded. He does have a little bit of head coaching experience, and right now as an assistant, he's said to be doing some amazing things over in New Jersey. I think this could be a really interesting out-of-the-box hiring, one that would probably get a fair amount of criticism, maybe be a little bit controversial, but this could be one of those hirings that has massive boom or bust, potential, in my opinion, with Andrew Brunette. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on potential hiring of Brunette for the head coaching job?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, and you're right that it would be controversial. It'd be like, you said it perfectly, boom or bust, where he's shown a lot of success in his very young career as a head coach so far, where he, like you said, he did lead the Florida Panthers to the President's Trophy, but he was only able to take them to the second round where they lost in the Battle of Florida against Tampa, but we went on to lose against Tampa too, so what do we know about beating them? But I don't know. He's young, and he could work well with the team, where you have guys on our team like Lafreniere, Kako, Heedle that do struggle a little bit in the NHL when they should be thriving. So to have a younger coach who kind of understands the game a little more and isn't just so like by the books hockey like we saw with Gallant, it could be something interesting to see. And the fact that he's with New Jersey right now, we do got to see if they would let us interview him. But I know, as me and you were just saying before, you kind of just, it's good business to let us interview him for a potential hire. So I don't know. I think seeing Andrew Brunette as the Rangers head coach, it would be very risky because we've seen in the past where we've hired like fresh coaches with David Quinn just a couple years ago before we hired Gallant. That was a complete disaster. That did not work well whatsoever. So then we went for the more veteran by the book head coach in Gerard Gallant, and that again didn't work out too well. So it kind of just seems like there's no set structure of what the Rangers are looking for. There's not like a list of exact details and guys that we need. You got to look at the team overall, like the players that we have, what the team is going to look like going to next season, because it is going to be a very different team, and just try to find the right guy that's going to make it work. And, out of the three names we've said today with Brunette, Sullivan, Laviolette, I think they all both have pros and cons. And, Chris Drury has said, as you mentioned, he's going to compile like a very long, robust list, and one of these guys has got to fit. So I'm even like after discussing all three of these guys, I still don't know who I want, what I don't want. We just need the right guy because at this point in our Cup window, it's kind of just like we need a head coach who knows how to win with us.
Yeah, and I think, again, as you mentioned, I agree. There's pros and cons to all these guys. If I had to kind of, throw them into different, maybe thresholds, or not thresholds, but compartmentalize them, right? Let's give them all labels. I'd say that your boom or bust pick right there is Andrew Brunette. I mean, the story with him, drunk driving a golf cart, blowing two stop signs and getting arrested, terrible look, but he's still got a job over in New Jersey. He's doing an excellent job over in New Jersey. He's been phenomenal as an assistant coach there, and he's very well regarded as a guy who has a lot of potential as a head coach. So that's your boom or bust. Again, the New York market probably eats this guy alive, so I don't feel completely comfortable with this. However, I'd be interested to see if Drury has any interest and shows any signs of life there, because if he does, then maybe I could get on board with it. But that's your boom or bust pick. I think your pipe dream pick is Mike Sullivan. In my opinion, I don't think it's likely he get let go by Pittsburgh. But if he does, I think that's Chris Drury's top choice right there. That's a guy who's shown he knows how to win in the postseason, which is exactly what the Rangers want. And then your X's and O's pick, I think, is, of course, Peter Laviolette. And probably the one that I'm leaning towards out of these three right now, just because I like the fact that he kind of blends in, some of that no-nonsense stuff into the locker room. I do think that it's good for the Rangers to have a bit more discipline because, as you mentioned, during the postseason, they were kind of just doing whatever they wanted, outwardly talking about how they dislike Gerard Gallant. That's something that you never want to see. So with Peter Laviolette, I think the no-nonsense, if it's blended well with good play, could really work out for the Rangers. Plus, I like his offensive mindset, the aggressive, fast-paced, get the puck in the net mindset. I think that's what the Rangers really need right now, considering their personnel. I mean, they've got the kid line, those young guys. They want to score some goals. And then those veterans like Trocheck, Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, all those guys are very offensive-minded forwards. So I do think that Laviolette's probably the one that I'm leaning towards right now. And I think that he makes a lot of sense for the team based on our needs at several positions. So that's really my recap take on all of those guys. I do think it's going to be a very thorough and exciting head coaching search. And of course, we're going to continue to update you all right here on Fireside Rangers. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on these candidates and any other candidates you want us to discuss down below in the comment section. Without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.